The petrodollar, the hidden system running the world. In June of 1974, he wasn't there to discuss peace. He wasn't there to discuss war. He was there to make a deal, a quiet deal. A deal so consequential, so structurally embedded in the global economy that 50 years later, you are still living inside it, whether you know it or not. And almost nobody does, because the petrodollar system is not something governments advertise. It's not something financial journalists explain on the evening news. It is, by design, invisible, running beneath every oil transaction, every trade deal, every act of economic warfare in the modern world. It is the hidden architecture of global power. And right now, in 2026, it is under the most serious challenge it has faced since the day it was created. This is the story of how it was built, how it works. Why is it cracking? And what happens to the world and to you if it breaks? To understand what Kissinger was doing in Saudi Arabia, you have to understand what happened 3 years earlier, in a small town in New Hampshire called Bretton Woods. In 1944, as World War II neared its end, 44 Allied nations gathered at a hotel in Bretton Woods to answer a question that would define the next century. What should the global financial system look like? The dollar became the world's anchor. It worked. For about 25 years, it worked extraordinarily well. And then America started spending more than it had. Vietnam, the great, they were legally entitled to do so. That was the deal. On August 15, 1971, President Nixon appeared on television and told the world that the United States was ending the dollar's convertibility to gold. Immediately, unilaterally, without a vote, without a conference, the Bretton Woods system was over. And with it, the entire foundation of global finance had just been pulled from beneath the world economy. Now, here's where Kissinger comes in. 1 year before Kissinger's Saudi trip, OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, launched an oil embargo. The results were immediate and brutal. Oil prices quadrupled overnight. Gas station lines stretched for miles. The American economy, still reeling from Nixon's gold shock 2 years earlier, was now being squeezed from both ends. Inflation exploded. Confidence in the dollar collapsed. Washington had a problem. A structural, existential problem. The dollar had just lost its gold backing. And now the Arab world was demonstrating with devastating clarity that they could weaponize oil against America whenever they chose. Kissinger's genius was understanding that these two problems were actually one solution. The deal was this: the United States would guarantee Saudi Arabia's military security, American weapons, American protection, a permanent shield against Saudi Arabia's enemies, both internal and external. In return, Saudi Arabia would do two things. First, price all of its oil exclusively in US dollars. Second, reinvest its oil revenues, its petrodollars, back into US Treasury bonds, effectively financing American government spending. And then, because Saudi Arabia was OPEC's most powerful member, Saudi Arabia would use its influence to ensure that every other OPEC nation followed the same rules. Global oil, priced in dollars, only dollars. In a single deal struck in a Riyadh palace, classified for 4 decades, Henry Kissinger had replaced the gold standard with something even more powerful. He had backed the dollar with oil. Here is why this matters so completely. Oil is not optional. It is the single most essential commodity in the global economy. It powers factories, ships, planes, heats homes, makes plastics, and drives agriculture. There is not a single nation on Earth that does not need oil. And from 1974 onward, if you needed oil, you needed dollars. Which means every country on Earth, every government, every central bank, every trading company had to hold US dollars in reserve. Not because they trusted America, not because they admired American institutions, because they literally could not buy energy without dollars. Think about what that means for the United States. It means the world has to hold trillions of dollars at any given moment to keep the economies running. That permanent global demand for dollars allows the United States to borrow money at lower interest rates than any other nation on Earth. It allows America to run trade deficits that would bankrupt any other country. It allows Washington to finance its military, its healthcare, its debt, with money that the rest of the world, in effect, subsidizes. Economists call this exorbitant privilege. It's the right to spend more than you earn indefinitely, because everyone else needs what only you can provide. And if any country tries to sell oil in a different currency to challenge that privilege, the consequences have been swift. In 2000, Saddam Hussein announced Iraq would sell its oil in euros instead of dollars. 3 years later, Iraq was invaded. In 2009, Muammar Gaddafi proposed a pan-African gold currency to replace the dollar in the African oil trade. 2 years later, NATO backed the rebels who overthrew and killed him. Now, this is not a conspiracy. These wars had multiple causes. But the timing, the pattern, and the public statements of the leaders involved tell a story that is difficult to dismiss. The petrodollar system has been defended, consistently, at enormous cost. But something is changing. In March 2023, Saudi Arabia announced it was open to selling oil in currencies other than the US dollar. That sentence should have been front-page news everywhere. It wasn't. In 2024, China settled its first LNG, liquefied natural gas trade in yuan, on the Shanghai Petroleum Exchange. Not a test, a real transaction, a precedent. And in 2026, Iran announced something that froze the financial world. Iran, which controls the Strait of Hormuz, the choke point through which 20% of the world's oil passes every single day, offered to reopen full access to the strait under one condition. Oil moving through the Strait of Hormuz must be traded in Chinese yuan, not dollars. Let that sit for a moment. The most critical oil shipping choke point on Earth, 20% of global supply, potentially denominated in a currency that is not the dollar. This is not a fringe scenario. This is not a theoretical risk. This is an active, ongoing negotiation between Iran, China, and the Gulf states, playing out right now in 2026. And it is not happening in isolation. Russia, cut off from the dollar system by Western sanctions, has been selling oil to India and China in rubles and yuan since 2022. India, the world's third largest oil importer, is quietly building payment infrastructure that doesn't touch the dollar. Brazil and China settled a trade deal in 2023, completely bypassing the dollar. The BRICS nations, representing 40% of the world's population, are actively discussing a shared settlement currency that would reduce dollar dependence. Each of these, individually, is a crack in the system. Together, they are a pattern, the same kind of pattern that preceded every other structural shift in the global financial order. But here's the critical question, the one that actually matters. To understand what petrodollar collapse would mean, if it happens, you have to understand what petrodollar dominance actually provides. Right now, because the world needs dollars to buy oil, there is a permanent structural demand for American currency. That demand allows the US government to borrow at roughly 4 to 5% interest. It keeps inflation lower than it would otherwise be. It means Americans can buy imported goods, electronics, clothing, food, at prices that are subsidized, invisibly, by the rest of the world's need for dollars. If that demand evaporates, if oil begins trading in yuan, in a basket of BRICS currencies, in anything other than dollars, the global need for dollar reserves collapses with it. The world sells its dollars, dollar supply surges, dollar value falls, and the cost of everything America imports, which is almost everything Americans consume, rises dramatically. Economists debate how fast this would happen. Some say it would be a slow, decade-long adjustment. Others say it could be sudden, a confidence event that cascades faster than any government could respond to. What they don't debate is this: the end of petrodollar dominance would be the largest single transfer of economic power in the modern era. Away from the United States, toward China, the Gulf states, and whoever builds the new infrastructure for global energy trade. This is not inevitable. The dollar's network effects are still enormous. The yuan is not freely convertible. No alternative system is ready to replace what exists. But the direction, for the first time since 1974, is no longer clearly in America's favor. And the next 5 years will likely determine which way it goes. Most people never knew it existed. It is now, for the first time, genuinely at risk. Henry Kissinger built a system in 1974 that gave the United States an invisible advantage, one that shaped every war, every trade policy, every act of economic statecraft for the next half-century. Most people never knew it existed. It is now, for the first time, genuinely at risk. Not from a single enemy, not from a single decision, but from the slow accumulation of alternatives, each one small, each one individually manageable, adding up to something that may, eventually, be irreversible. The petrodollar is not just a financial story. It is the story of how power actually works in the modern world. Not through armies alone, not through elections, but through the invisible systems that determine whose currency the world needs and whose it doesn't. And understanding that system, knowing it exists, knowing how it was built, knowing the forces that are now challenging it, is the difference between watching history happen and understanding why. Every headline has a past. Every crisis has a system behind it. Subscribe to Epoch Insight and hit the notification bell so you never miss an analysis. And let us know in the comments, do you think the petrodollar survives the next decade? We read every single one.